Her advisors were Professor Janet Van Hel, and then postdoc Sarah Gray, who's now a faculty member, and she went to the University of Granada. Her majors are psychology and Spanish, and she's going to be talking to us about the effects of facial cues on sentence comprehension for monolingual and bilingual listeners and ERP study.
Okay, everybody can hear me? So yes, as she said, we're going to look at the effects on speaker accent, speaker identity. So with an increase of cross-cultural interactions, more people are communicating through a common language, but with differing accents. And previous accent and speaker identity research by Dr. Sarah Gray and Dr. Jeanette Van Hel has examined how speaker identity as a social cue plays a role in language comprehension, listener experience, and attitudes on comprehension. My study extends this previous research on accent and speaker identity with the addition of a non-linguistic cue, which is the faces of the two accented speakers. This visual cue will boost the impact of speaker identity on language comprehension, in particular to the comprehension of foreign accented speech. By presenting the face with the speaker, the participants now have multiple cues to the identity of the speakers. Similarly, when you hear a dog barking on the street, you kind of have an idea of whether it's a Chihuahua or a Great Dane, but when you're seeing the dog bark, when you see it at the same time it is barking, you have this reinforcement of what type of dog it is. So, what we examined were do the additional non-linguistic cues to speaker identity, such as facial information, affect the neural response found for foreign accented speaker identity? And more specifically, do listeners use facial information as a cue during online sentence comprehension of native and foreign accented speech? And are the effects of facial information similar between native monolingual listeners and non-native bilingual listeners? And are these effects of facial information similar for semantic and grammatical information? So we used EEG to measure the ERP correlates of semantic and syntactic processing to capture sentence comprehension for native and foreign accented speech comprehension in monolingual and bilingual listeners. So our participants were two groups, 15 English monolinguals here at Penn State University, and 17 Spanish-English bilinguals living in Granada, Spain. So the average age for the monolinguals was about 19 years old, while the average age for the bilinguals was around 24 years. And both groups had significant exposure to formal English, as well as the bilinguals self-reported that they had very high rates of English comprehension and understanding. So the addition of the facial cue, both groups of participants were provided with the facial images of a Chinese English accented speaker and a American English accented speaker. And these images were accompanied with the phrase, "You're going to listen to these two adults talk about their friends' lives." So the task was an auditory sentence listening task that contained grammatically correct and grammatically incorrect, as well as semantically well-formed and semantically incorrect sentences. There's a total of 240 sentences throughout the whole task. It was fairly long, but we had 48 comprehension questions, and all the sentences were pre-recorded by a standard American English accented speaker and a Chinese English accented speaker. So the grammatically well-formed sentences and the grammatically incorrect sentences contain either a correct pronoun match or pronoun mismatch, while the semantic sentences contained correct semantic meaning or semantic anomaly. So an example of the pronoun sentence with the pronoun mismatch would be this.
Thomas was planning to attend the meeting, but she missed the bus to school.
And that is with the American English accented speaker. And the semantic anomaly.
Kellen traveled across the ocean in a cactus to attend the conference.
So as you can see, it's fairly obvious with both accented speakers that there is either a grammatical or semantic error. With the results, just a quick overview of ERP research. So ERPs capture the neural responses to specific stimuli, and in this case, language comprehension. For these graphs, we measure the negative voltages, negative 3 microvolts go up and positive 3 microvolts go down, and it's from negative 100 milliseconds to 1,000 milliseconds. So for here, we're looking at pronouns. So the red line indicates the pronoun error that was elicited, and the black line is the correct pronoun match. So when the American English speaker made a pronoun error, the English monolinguals, listeners, tend to create a P600 neural response, which is a positive wave at the 600 millisecond mark that indicates a semantic error, as well as like a non-preferred semantic structure, syntactic structure. Sorry. However, when the Chinese speaker makes that same pronoun error, the English monolinguals show no significant effects whatsoever. For semantics, when the American English speaker makes a semantic anomaly, the monolingual listeners show a very distinct N400 effect, which is a positive wave at the 400 mark, when that indicates a semantic error. And when the Chinese speaker makes the same kind of semantic error, there's a delayed N400 effect. So for the Spanish-English bilinguals, when either accented speaker made a pronoun error, there were no significant effects. They didn't register it as any different than when it was a correct formed sentence. And for semantics, there were N400-like responses to semantic errors in both conditions. However, as you can see, it's not as dramatic as the N400 seen with monolinguals. For sentence comprehension, as expected, English monolinguals completely understood the task at hand. A little bit more for the English accented speaker than the Chinese, but there was no significant difference. And for the Spanish-English bilinguals, overall, they comprehended the sentence listening task, both with high rates of understanding for both accented speakers. So in conclusion, for the English monolinguals, the pronoun errors elicited a P600 and the semantic errors elicited an N400 in the native English accented condition. This P600 to pronoun errors differs from the previous study by Gray and Van Hel, who did not promote facial cues, indicating that the addition of this facial information promoted grammatical rather than referential processing for syntactic errors. And in the non-native Chinese-English accented condition, there are no effects for pronoun processing, but there was an N400 in delayed onset for semantics. And this delayed N400 fits the pattern with the previous research on speaker accented identity, suggesting that facial cues do not aid in the semantic processing. And the absence of any kind of grammatical processing fits related research showing that when an English monolingual listener listens or hears a grammatical error from a non-native speaker, they do not process that error at all. And for the Spanish-English bilinguals, as was mentioned, there was no significant effects for pronoun mismatches in either accent. This indicates that the bilinguals are not sensitive to this grammatical error, which was somewhat hypothesized to begin with because pronoun mismatches are a very common error for Spanish-English bilinguals. And for semantics, there was an N400-like response, but the bilinguals processed both semantic errors very similarly for both accented speakers. so the face cue did not aid in the processing. Just want to talk about my prior experience. Going abroad was absolutely amazing. The opportunities that that Prior provided me with was incredible, and the girls that I went with, they were amazing as well. And to be able to carry out research as a very independent way as an undergraduate is something that not many people get to have the opportunity to do. So I want to thank everybody for giving me that opportunity.
There is time for one question. Oh my goodness. Carol Miller. Carol, please.
Well, it's really just a clarification question. So they saw the pictures at the beginning and
Yes.
that was it?
Yes.
Right, okay. Not at the end, with every sentence or only once?
No, only at the
end.
introduction. I think with future research, the pictures would be shown, the facial images would be shown throughout the task to see how much that would reinforce the idea. But for this specific task, it was just shown at the introduction of the task.
And the sentences were then mixed, were they blocked in terms of accentedness or?
No, they were mixed.
Clara.
Okay, so suppose you did this design where you reinforced for each individual sentence by showing the picture of the intended speaker again. What do you think would happen if you mixed up the faces so that they provided like conflicting expected information? So the Asian face goes with the standard American English accent, and the white face goes with the Chinese accent.
I think it would definitely have an effect on their processing, specifically probably more of grammar. So I think with the monolinguals, if they were seeing an Asian accented speaker, the face, but they heard the American English accent make that kind of pronoun error, I think that would definitely have like a different neural response than what we saw here.
May I ask a question? I said there wasn't. But I can ask a quick question?
Sure.
Because there is a few minutes. Native English speakers are not, perhaps don't interact with non-native English speakers often, and assume in general that anybody who is not a non-native English speaker will probably make mistakes. But there are other parts in the world where when you hear a non-native speaker speak, the experiences of individuals is such that those L2 speakers are actually very good speakers of the language.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that the cues will aid similarly the individuals depending on their experience with non-native speakers?
Yes. I think that also carries over to the effect that we had on the Spanish-English bilinguals, because they were not, living in Granada, they weren't exposed as much to an Asian accent, as well as the Asian Chinese accented face. So I think that's has a part in why they didn't have the same kind of grammatical and semantic neural responses.
Any other questions? Karen.
In your ERP results for the monolinguals, I think I also see a P600 after the implementation check to see if that's significant. Because I get the same thing, the Chinese data. So if you get that,
No, the next slide.
yes. So the BC down there,
Yes.
yeah. So I want to check if that's significant. It's probably good.
All right. Thank you very much.